after 6 p.m. This is Bless Radio, and this is the Spiritual Discussion Program. I'm Saad in London, in Southeast London, in Bromley. And I believe, Gregory, you're there with me as well? Gregory?
Hello.
Welcome, Gregory. Please, as usual, tell us where you are and how's the weather where you are.
Maybe I don't need to speak about the weather because the weather is what it is, just like in the UK, here in Brussels.
Okay. So the weather here, I didn't say it actually yet. Yes, the weather here in London, it's right now it's dark because the clocks went back over the weekend. But it's been, I will say, mild and with rain showers on and off. But it's not raining just now. So
precisely what we have here in Brussels.
Okay, good. So yes, welcome listeners. Just to remind you again, the topic, the name of the show is the Spiritual Discussion Program. And the aim is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abrushin. And we have a topic every week for discussion. The topic for tonight is taking responsibility. Taking responsibility. You're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. I'm going to begin with what is the Grail message? The Grail message, in the light of truth by Abrushin, is a spiritual knowledge of life. It offers an explanation of the world, a picture of creation on the basis of natural laws. Its lectures contain valuable basic elements as a help in life, for through the knowledge mediated, the reader is again brought closer to life and led back to God. The Grail message deals with important fundamental questions of life by explaining in a clear and logical way the automatic working of the laws of nature, the whole weaving of creation, allowing every process to be recognized and thereby the purpose of our whole life. It is directed at the individual and speaks to the innate experiences of the human being, their strengths and weaknesses. Thus, every reader has the opportunity to discover through the intuitive perception if what is stated is the truth. Combining with the matter-of-fact reasoning, a complete world picture arises where there is no separation between the visible world and the great world beyond the five senses, nor any separation between scientific and religious striving for knowledge. I'd like to give you a couple of quotes from the author of the Grail message, Abrushin. The hearer and reader of my lectures should always work within himself, keenly probing and building bridges from one lecture to the other, as well as out into the great and small world happenings. Only then will he be able to understand the Grail message and find that it gradually shapes itself into one complete whole without leaving any gaps. Again and again in all the happenings, the reader will come back to the basic features. He can explain everything without having to change even one single sentence. The word of the Grail message lives, so that it permits only those people who really carry the honest desire in their souls to find abundantly. All else is automatically rejected by it. For the arrogant and those who seek superficially, the message will remain the book with 7 seals. And I'd like to give you one more quote from the author. I wish to fill the gaps which have so far always remained unanswered in the souls of men, and which never leave any serious thinker in peace if he earnestly seeks for the truth. Dear listeners, I just want to remind you the topic we're discussing tonight is taking responsibility. And you're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, as you know, I like to always look at the title and do some check the meaning of the title in the dictionary. And I did that, of course, for tonight's topic, which is taking responsibility. The main keyword there is responsibility. So I looked in the dictionary, and this is what I found. It gives two sort of meanings, or two statements, I should say. The state of fact of having a duty to deal with something or having control over someone. So I'll repeat that. This is the first statement about the meaning of responsibility. The state of fact of having a duty to deal with something or having control over someone. And it gives a little example. It says a true leader takes responsibility for their team and helps them achieve goals. That's one statement. And then the second one, the state or fact of being accountable or to blame for something. The state or fact of being accountable to or to blame for something. And the example they give here, the group has claimed responsibility for a string of murders. That's the example they're given in the dictionary. So, Gregory, again, I just want to get, just to ask you really about this definition of responsibility.
Actually, the second definition seems to be the most appropriate. For when it is said a state of fact, that already presumes that a personality has initiated an activity. For when one initiates an activity, it's only a matter of course that he himself or herself who initiated that activity must be accountable for it. For it would be injustice to ask one who did not initiate an activity to account for it, for that person lacks the facts at the beginning.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that, Gregory. Yes. You know, what you've said, it sort of points directly to the, you know, what is responsibility there, because So what I want to say is, what you pointed out there is that someone initiates, so it's automatically pointing straight to what is responsibility. It's like it's so clear that where this responsibility starts. Somebody initiates, makes a decision, or takes an action, and then of course they are the one responsible, so they take direct responsibility, by that. Yes. Okay. Now let's look at, there was another part of that in that definition. It says, take the state, you said a state or fact of being accountable. And then there's also another part which says blame for something. So I guess if you take an action and it fails, or what you intended does not happen with this action or decision, then it's like a failure, and then by default you could say that you are to blame for that. So is responsibility, does that include blame as well?
It would be wrong to tie responsibility to blame only. For when one initiates an activity, depending on what lies behind the volition, or what we may say, should one put it now? What lies behind the volition is what makes one to initiate an activity. If subsequently that activity unrolls along the line and all that is good in accordance with the laws of creation or the laws of nature, such that it now subsequently brings benefits to all, then one wouldn't say there is a blame. You don't blame someone for that which is beneficial to all. The only time you put a blame is when the consequences of that initiation of that particular activities do not go accordingly. Then you will still point to the initiator of that particular activity here in the world of matter.
Yes, for sure. I can fully agree with that. That the blame is always for something that didn't work how it's supposed to work. It went wrong, basically. And so obviously you don't blame someone for when something is fruitful and it is successful. So of course, yes. So that word is too one-sided. I can hear that, and so yeah, you don't blame someone for doing something good. That's for sure. At the same time, you can say if somebody did the good, they get the reward for that as well. So okay, I want to explore now about accountability, because that's what responsibility, people take that immediately. You hear that all the time in the news when a politician has done something, and then, but normally it's about when it doesn't work, they say, oh, you're accountable. So let's just look at the meaning of accountability there. Again, I looked that up in the dictionary, and it says accountability is the obligation to explain, justify, and take responsibility for one's actions. So I'll say it again. Accountability is the obligation to explain, justify, and take responsibility for one's actions. First of all, Gregory, is that a good definition? Is that a good definition?
Well, there are many definitions, and most of these definitions are only approximate. But a key thing there in accountability is to be able to explain explain in simple, sub-activity, what has happened or the consequences. That means what then came after when that activity was initiated. Which activity or set of activities are in essence subject to the laws of creation through which all that we have or all that has come to existence depends. So it is not just a discussion in an empty space. It is a process which one must consider in a given space. That means there are actors, there are people, there are other things other than people. For if one takes for instance, you go into nature and you carry out certain activities because no one can see you, and those activities turn out to be poisonous to the environment. Of course, there are beings who are responsible for the maintenance of the environment. And therefore, through your activity, you bear full responsibility, all right, for what you have initiated.
Thank you for that again, Gregory. Again, we're building the picture now of how this responsibility can be understood and how it works. So, like you're given the context of the laws of creation. And I'll explore that in a moment a bit further. What I want to ask next on this now is some things are very clear, Gregory, or I did make this decision, or I made this action, and then some consequence happened from that. And those are clear cut. Other things, it's not so clear. I'm thinking of people say, "Oh, this was in my fate," and or destiny, and but you can't say from that it seems not so logical. Oh, how did that? How it could be in my fate this way. So I just want to explore that as well. So let's say, are the decisions that we make, Gregory, are they all on the earthly level, like on Earth, and the consequences happen on the Earth, or are certain decisions before, or happen sometime outside of the Earth? Maybe that's the best way to put it. Is just to get that another side of this picture.
When a decision is made, that decision could likely have impact on the spiritual, on the non-spiritual. On the spiritual, that is a domain which has nothing to do with the world of matter. Then we have the earth, which belongs to the world of matter. And in that particular sense, we have that this initiation of some activity is likely to have an impact also in the world of matter that is here on earth. So you'll find that there is no division as such, for all is one continuous existence. Therefore, you find that what then happens is that an initiation of an activity has an earthly impact and also a non-earthly impact. The earthly impact is what one sees with the five senses, or what one is able to use, the five senses that one has, the five earthly senses. Whereas on a non-earthly domain, one may refer to one's intuitive perception, which intuitive perception is an impression from the spirit or a spiritual activity. So that is what one finds, that all these, the earthly and the non-earthly, are connected through one's intuitive perception.
Again, thank you for your answer there, Gregory. So now we have expanded the picture of the working of, you can say, responsibility into the earthly and non-earthly. In this case, we're talking spiritual. And you gave the context that although it's like one, there are two domains, and yet they do work. I want to say this in a very clear manner. So there are two different domains, the spiritual and the earthly. However, one has the impact on the other. So if, Greg, could you just clarify that part of it? So let's say you have a spiritual activity or decision. Does the spiritual activity decision only become active in the spiritual, or does it also become active in the earthly?
Depending on the volition, some of this activity, take for instance, when you have an impression striking you, a deep impression, for you to, say, compose some music. That is a deep impression which might have arisen from spiritual movement deep within. However, for it to manifest here on earth, now music needs to be written. And then that's why you have composers who now gradually put these strong impressions on paper, and then having different instruments to participate in the rendering of this piece of music. This is what you find in most of the arts.
Thank you for that picture again, Gregory. And so the second part of that I want to explore now is earthly, obviously, decisions or decisions, yes, and actions will manifest obviously in the earthly. Do they also impact into the spiritual?
One only made the example that there was an activity which started from spiritual movement. When you have that, in all naturalness, it originated from one's spiritual movement, and therefore it has an impact on the spiritual. Also, we have that because it is directed towards the earthly, it has an impact also in the earthly.
I see. Just to just re-clarify, because I didn't quite follow one part of that. So just to be, I'm sort of repeating the question, but if you could, don't mind just repeating that part. So the question I'm asking is, so does the earthly decision or action impact the spiritual? If you can just repeat that.
Well, the question you had asked was, we had a spiritual activity having an impact on the earthly. That was the one I discussed.
Yes, and then
now this is a different question.
Yes.
Does an earthly activity have an impact on the spiritual?
Yes.
Sometimes, not always.
Right. Okay. So it's not okay. So yeah. So it's again. I think the best way to probably look at this thing is always everything has to be taken into its context, how it's going to work. So then things are clearer. Okay. So let's. I'm going to now pick an example of something that is happening currently in the news, Gregory. You probably heard of this story, which is Marcus Rashford, this famous English young footballer. He was in the news earlier, let's say in the summer, and he's in the news again now, where he was saying that school children, they let's say before the coronavirus, they would get this funding for their school meals. And obviously, with the coronavirus happening, they were not going to school anymore, and but so the government wasn't giving that funding anymore for these school meals. This is really helpful for the people who are, let's say, poor, not so well off, and they can't afford to have meals for their children. And in the summer, the government did a U-turn and actually did provide that funding. And then now the October half term has come. They said, no, the government has said we are not going to continue that now. We're just giving other means that people can earn money. They can get money through other ways. They can have benefits. And however, the public has, been quite angry. Let's say in this situation, and they said they support what Marcus Rashford has been saying, that no, the government should continue with this funding. So the question, and there's two sides to the story. I'm going a bit long about this, but I just want to build up the picture. So there are two sides to the story. One side is that the parents are responsible for their children, and they should provide everything for their children. And there's another side, we could say a little bit more looking at more compassionately, saying, well, if these parents can't, not capable of that, the children shouldn't be suffering because of their parents, and the government should provide. And so my question is, in this situation, Gregory, who is responsible here? Is it the government to look after these children, or is it the parents?
When one refers to a country, one is referring to the citizens of that country. And in that particular country, the citizens elect a number of people to help in the formation of a government to look into the welfare of the citizenry. One thing has to be very clear. If the government, the collective wealth of the nation can support such an activity, it is well and good. If the collective wealth is unable to support such an activity, one cannot then turn around and say the government who represents the people must do it. So there is always a need to examine what the benefits or the so-called cost benefits in the earthly sense to find out if it is possible. Therefore, it is not right to tell the government or not tell the government what they must do. What will be right is for all parties involved to come together, for it must be well realized that it is one for all and all for one. It is the same citizenry.
Thank you for your answer, Gregory. And it reminds me of our last show where, as usual, you need to take everything into account. Not, oh, this is one side wants this and another side wants something else, because we don't live on our own like an island. Each person is not an island. We are sort of, working with the people around us, and you can't sort of ignore or turn against some side just because you don't agree. So you have to realize the reality is that they actually are living in the same place, sharing the same land and place, and obviously you have to find a solution by working together. So thank you for bringing that out. Dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdrusheen. And if you're interested in getting information or getting a copy of the Grail message for yourself, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And the topic we're discussing tonight is taking responsibility. Taking responsibility. You're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, I want to go back into the spiritual side of the discussion now. Yes, somebody sent me this question. It says, what did Jesus mean when he said, take up your cross each day and walk or follow me? So, yeah, just repeat that question. What did Jesus mean when he said, take up your cross each day and walk or follow me?
Basically, the cross is the symbol of the truth. What it only means, therefore, is follow the laws of creation through which you yourself came into existence. Follow me only means make sure that in your activities you swing in such a way that you can therefore approach the living love whom he himself is.
Thank you for that. And what we are talking about responsibility, and in it always you see like there's an action or decision, and then there's a consequence, and it's like you can see, as you said, there's an initiator, and so you can like follow a line, or that person did something, and then there's a consequence, and so there's, you could say, justice a clear line of justice there. And then talking about Jesus, we know that he's love, and he talked about forgiveness. And I wanted to ask you, how does that fit with justice? Because justice seems to be absolute, you did this, and or let's say another saying of Jesus, what you sow you shall reap. And so you did an action, and then there's a consequence of that action, and so you reap it. And then it seems there's no escape, from that. And yet then there's this other side, which we say Jesus, he's love, and there's God is love as well. And then somehow with love, and then there's also forgiveness. So there seems to be another side where, which on the surface maybe looks like, oh, you can get out of the this like a justice where, let's say something, I'm talking obviously when there's a terrible consequence, because when there's something good, everybody's happy. We're all happy about that. But when it's something, let's say, terrible, and that's the only time when you think about forgiveness, obviously, and love there, I guess. Most of us think of that when forgiveness when something terrible is happening. So just to be clear about my question, what I want to ask you, Gregory, is how does love and forgiveness interact with justice?
The whole picture may be seen as a two-step scenario. When one has initiated an activity, if that activity in its consequence returns what is beneficial to all, you would not talk of forgiveness, for it is beneficial to all. If that activity turns out subsequently to have adverse effects, then the possibility comes in on what should the personality do. Therein lies the second initiation. Along the line, if that personality now initiates other activities such as to improve himself and also others in his or her neighborhood, then what happens is that that personality builds up an environment around himself or herself, which environment will be such that with a strong volition, when the final effects of the first initiation comes back, they will meet an improved person, and the impact, the severity of the impact to touch the same personality is greatly reduced because that personality has improved himself or herself. Then that's one may refer to as forgiveness. For an opportunity was granted you to make the initial activity, and also the freedom to make a counter activity is also there. So all these lies within the laws of creation. But one thing is very clear. Whatever a human spirit or a soul has initiated, it is that the nature of the fruit must be similar in what he himself or herself will reap. So it's a two-stage thing when one is considering how love comes in. Love grants one the possibility. Where there no love, then in the initial activities, it will be that the full force of the reciprocal activity will hit one. A simple example, when one looks out, you find here on earth that you might even injure yourself in the process of those decisions. Yet at the same time, there are remedies, there are hospitals where you yourself, with a strong volition, could be helped. Things are so well woven within the threads in creation, in nature, that when one has made an initial decision and along the line one senses that not all is well, that person is free to provide a counter current through his further activities that will also benefit or be of benefit to all. Then such a person has purified himself. For when you make a decision which is not beneficial to all, it's more like one has tied a knot within the fabric in his weaving in creation. And when you now carry out a counter, more it's like untying that knot that one has tied initially. And with that, one becomes free and is able to rise higher, deep within himself, in accordance with the laws of spiritual gravitation.
Thank you for that answer, Gregory. I know it looked a bit complex, maybe, because, as you said, it was a two-stage process, and you really need to have that explanation and picture to really comprehend the situation, because there's it could appear that, oh, there's justice. What you sow, you shall reap. And then there's something called love and forgiveness, where it seems you can bypass justice, or even it becomes arbitrary. But because, let's say, there's two stages, as you say, you did one action first, which, let's say in this case, obviously forgiveness is for something that you done something bad, basically, or wrong. You don't forgive for something that is good. So obviously you do an action, let's say, which is a bad or has a bad consequence, and then harmful consequence, let's call it. And then you can get the justice for that harmful consequence, and you can have a second action which forgives, and that where the love comes in. And so, as you say, the blow of the justice is softened through the forgiveness. So it's not so the consequence of your action is not as severe as it would be otherwise. So thank you for that picture that you gave there. Another thing I've received a question from a listener, but before I ask that question, I just want to follow up from what we just talked about. Gregory, what we've been talking about here, responsibility and the laws, that is, let's say, the system of the Almighty, the laws of nature or the laws of creation. This is, let's say, system of the Almighty that is in place, that works in creation, independent of human beings. And but there's also on the earth we have the human beings is justice system, if I can call it. Every country obviously has different laws, but in the end the aim is still the same, to provide justice. So what I want to ask you, Gregory, the laws, the natural laws, or the laws of this creation that we've mentioned, like sowing and reaping, that we've talked about, does it, how can I say, does it work, how can I say, so the human justice system, does it work somehow through that, these laws of nature, or is it completely independent?
On the one hand, here on Earth, there is the so-called human justice system. On the other hand, there is the spiritual justice system, through which all that exists came into being. What then happens? Here on Earth, one can easily identify that the earthly justice system, in many cases, are so different from the laws of nature in which real justice lie. For the laws of nature grants one the opportunity to come to realization of the impact one's decision have been on the whole, and also he himself or herself. However, when one considers the earthly justice system, only very few of them will grant one the opportunity to make amends. For many a system, one is just pushed aside, first, over very trivial things which could have been redeemed. One has not seen the opportunity where in the earthly justice system, where redemption is made available to the so-called offending personality. The earthly justice system is only based on what many are able to see physically. They do not take into consideration the spiritual laws, and therefore these are two different things. But in some places, maybe in the way they have tried to create or form a system, the possibility could be offered for redemption. But the fundamental difference here is the spiritual laws have an impact on the earthly. Most of the time, the earthly punishments which are meted out have nothing to do with the way the spiritual, that which removes the laws of creation. A simple example, you might want to cross a road, and in accordance with the laws of earthly laws, you have to wait for the red light to come on before you cross in order to prevent any accident. Therefore, if you break that law, the way the earthly justice system says, you might be put away for years. Maybe at the time you are crossing that road, you could see that there is a vehicle coming, but it's so very far away. And in crossing the pedestrian, through the pedestrian crossing, feeling. So what lies behind the justice systems is what counts, strictly speaking.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I want to ask you this question from the listener now. It says, as small children are not so burdened with responsibility in earthly sense, can we say in the spiritual sense that immature spirits are not burdened as much as developed ones? I think this, let me use that as a comment. And then the next part, it says, should we consider our leaders who seemingly act irresponsibly, consider underdeveloped spirits and therefore have pity on them? I think I'm going to just rephrase this question and comment first, Gregory, and then put it to you. So it says, as small children are not so burdened with responsibility, can we say in the spiritual sense that immature spirits are not burdened like as developed ones? So yes, so mature, I think he's talking about adults, I guess. So the question from that is, should we consider our leaders who act irresponsibly as underdeveloped spirits, therefore, and therefore have pity on them? I don't know if that made sense, Gregory, at all.
One will try to make sense out of some of these statements. For when it is said one is a leader, it means that personality is to make decisions, is to be accountable. So whatever he or she, whatever things they have initiated, they themselves must account for it. So accountability is the key. Ignorance of the law is no exception. It's not an excuse. A simple example. If one is to move from one place or the other, or one is, in quotes, like you find in many cases, playing football, if he or her is a child and in the course of the game injures himself or hurts himself, should we say because he's a child that injury should not hold? That person, through their activity, have hurt themselves, maybe through rough play or whatever. Therefore, you cannot say that because someone is immature and goes ahead to bear responsibility, even in his immaturity, to take the faith of those who look up to leaders for guidance. In their immaturity, they trust everything aside and jumped in there. And now, in their decisions, lead a whole nation to the bottom. At the same time, they themselves want to be forgiven. It is only fair that before one initiates an activity, he or she must reflect very calmly if they have the innate ability to carry out this activity. You would not say you will go to the hospital and expect somebody who is not qualified to be a surgeon to operate on sick patients, because that personality has forced himself or says, oh, I'm the surgeon, I know how to carry out these operations. Responsibility is the key, and each personality first needs to experience, need to know how to carry out certain things in such a way that it will bring benefit. So ignorance of the law is no excuse. Just as you will not ask someone who does not know how to fly a Boeing 747 to pilot a plane, or because he himself or herself wants to be the pilot or wants to be the driver. There is the training, the gradual training, which leads to maturity. So you will not ask someone who is immature for an activity to carry it out.
Thank you again, Gregory, for giving such a clear picture and graphic sort of example there, which is so obvious for anyone to see, how something is supposed to be, and how ridiculous it is if it wasn't that way. Like you say, a surgeon, you wouldn't go to the hospital and ask a surgeon to operate on you who's not qualified and can't do the job. It's he will not even, you don't have to think about it even. And so it's so obvious, and yet when we think about leaders of countries, and we seem to have a very low standard in that regard. So yes, thank you for bringing that very, very in a clear manner, showing that in a clear manner. Dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. UK time. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abrushin. And if you're interested in getting a copy of the Grail message or want some more information, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, message.com. And the topic we're discussing tonight is taking responsibility. Taking responsibility. And you're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Gregory, continuing sort of on the theme of leaders and you could say politics a bit. Again, especially in the news, you always keep seeing these things where, let's say, a politician will there'll be election time, like we're seeing in America at the moment. The leaders will promise something, make a bold promise, really you could say entice people to vote for them, and then they get into power, let's say, and then in the end they don't deliver that. It could be many reasons they are not able to deliver it. Maybe it was too far-fetched, or they didn't take account the difficulties in it, I guess. But then, Gregory, again, we're talking about responsibility and accountability. Let's say something, they claim they were going to do something big and it fails, and then other people shout and say, "Oh, you have to resign now. You have failed," and then the leader will say will basically ignore that. Most of the time, you see that, and then either they will, I don't know, change that policy or try something to improve on what they were proposing, you could say. So they could do something like that, and then probably, people normally in power, if these elections are for 4 years or 5 years, the next time this election, the public will have the chance to vote them out or keep them in, I guess. And so there doesn't seem to be, Gregory, like in other situations where there's a contract, between a client and I'm thinking, between two parties, basically, where it's clearly written, this is what you are agreeing to, and then you deliver it. If you don't deliver it, this is either there's a dispute and you go to court, or or there's some sort of penalty very clearly all set out. But as I say, in these political situations, it seems that it's just you vote, and if you're there for 4 years or 5 years, and then the next accountability is only the election. So my question on that, Gregory, is there a way that the responsibility, you showed already in the previous question how clear the person who's supposed to be the leader is supposed to act, and yet we don't see that same level, you could say, of responsibility. So is there a way, Gregory, for that responsibility to be manifest, let's say, in a satisfactory way? I'm trying to think of the way to ask this question. So something that is satisfactory rather than this very disappointing system that we seem to have.
Of course, there is a way, and a very simple and very clear way. For whoever needs to be in the position to select a particular personality, that particular person who is making that decision must, through his or her intuition, reflect very deeply for that personality who is making that selection must understand in itself the responsibilities attached to that. And through that, in their intuitive selection, they should know that a so-called candidate cannot give to you what they, the candidates, do not have. A candidate that does not have sympathy or empathy cannot give you empathy. A candidate that is not gentlemanly cannot bring gentlemanly. By their innate activities, they exhibit themselves. If, however, you go ahead and select a particular candidate who lacks the abilities to lead a nation, then it is useless to turn around and accuse others. What many have sown through their carelessness, that is what they themselves will have to reap. For when you observe very carefully, in some countries, for instance of the COVID, there were some who were in charge of the affairs of that country who responded as quickly as possible, for they themselves know what it means to lose someone because they have the empathy. They have strong good volition, which good volition is to be of benefit to all of those who have elected you to make provisions for them such that they are able to operate with safe conduct in health. Yet, on the same earth, there are others who, when faced with the same challenges, tossed all responsibilities aside, tossed all accountability aside. Like it is said, by their activities, they reveal whom they are, whether they have those innate qualities that are necessary for leadership or not. The human spirits, or the class of human spirits, always have that opportunity to select him or her who they sense that can lead them to better pastures. Else, you will have the scenario of lost sheep following a false shepherd.
Thank you again, Gregory, for your answer there. Again, you give that sort of a clear picture where you can see sort of, it's like a contrasting thing where one is competent, you could say, for the dealing with the situation, and another one incompetent of dealing with that same situation. And so I'm thinking, Gregory, let's say, because let's say where there's a democracy, there's candidates, like you say, fighting for that election, where but you might find that the choice that you have, they're not, none of the candidate is really, let's say, competent enough for, let's say, because everybody is competent in something and not so competent in other things, but you might not find that any of them is, let's say, outstanding in competence. I know we don't want to label or any particular country or people, so just that might, because every place is different also. So when you don't have, Gregory, let's say, good choice of competent people, if I can say it in that way, it makes it very difficult situation. It's like you just pick the best, the worst, the best out of the worst. If I can, I'm using extreme words, but I just mean just to paint that picture. It's like you don't have the competent people. So is that a sign, Gregory, that that country can't come up, or that those people are not capable of having, let's say, competent people? Because you don't think there's anybody any place where there's some exclusive right to that these people are better than another people. There's competent people. There's all variety of people in every race, hardworking, not so hardworking, intelligent, not so intelligent. So, is there anything, Gregory, the question I'm asking basically, where that leads to where a country, let's say, doesn't have the best choice there of candidate?
Would one say the best choice which have come up is not from that particular set of citizens? What is needed is to observe whatever has been provided with regards to the fulfillment of duty regarding the tasks which are available in leading a particular nation. So when it is taught or discussed that, we don't have the best, it has always been stressed. When you have a nation, each particular individual in that nation, or the matured, or the so-called elders, they should strive to improve themselves in such a way that when they have to pick someone who knows how to fulfill his duty, they will do it intuitively. By intuitively, it is not what one sees on the outside, but the innate characteristics, which characteristics are very, in quotes, difficult to come by. For instance, a person who is humble, a personality who shows compassion, a person who is courageous, a person who is modest. These are the qualities which the citizens of a country must strive to cultivate within themselves, such that when the time comes and they are granted the opportunity to select someone, they are able to recognize within the citizens one who most likely embody these skills. But what happens? Many of these selections are done intellectually. That means there was no deep reflection before they selected. And having selected, they are therefore subjected to the consequences of what they have selected. So if you need someone who is good, you yourself, knowing fully well that the system is not perfect, you yourself must first strive to be good. In such a way, you purify yourself. And in doing that, such people who lack those abilities to lead a nation will be prevented from coming to the fore. But if one does not improve himself or herself and remains as shallow as ever, then those who will come up to get elected must be shallow people, people who are deceptive, people who are more or less idiots. They are the ones who will come forward. This is in accordance with the laws of creation. For the human spirits have the freedom to choose. But in that freedom, it is expected that they have improved themselves and have considered what is made available to them. Considered intuitively, not intellectually, for the intellect can be deceived, but the spirit that is active cannot be deceived.
Thank you, Gregory, for that answer. Again, you've sort of expanded our understanding and thrown some light on how we should look at these things. We look at things, let's say, on the surface intellectually, and then there's things looking deeper under the surface, which is this intuition. Then you know what is really happening, because you can go deep, to what the situation is, rather than on the surface. People can talk all fancy words and make big promises and so on, but they're not real. They're just almost deceptions to get what they want, which is maybe power or limelight or whatever it is. And then because we were deceived, we let them, we allow ourselves to be deceived and vote them in, or whatever the situation happens to be. And then don't surprise what the consequences are when we are not looking at in depth what is actually behind the person, and what they actually are capable of. So thank you for bringing that out. I've received a question, Gregory. You could call it a question or a comment as well. It's sort of very connected with what we are talking about. It says, those incompetent leaders, is it like that? I won't read it. Let me read it exactly what this question is, and then I can sort of reword it after that. So it says, those incompetent leaders, isn't that something like the end time sign? And as it was said, that false prophets or leaders will emerge shortly before the judgment. So I'm going to try and rephrase that. So basically, these incompetent leaders are like a sign of this, let's say, the end times, or the times that we live today. And it has been said that the false prophets or leaders will emerge shortly before the judgment. So Gregory, is that what is happening? Oh, you're on mute, Gregory.
Thanks. There have been incompetent leaders for quite some time, even before the advent of the judgment. For one can talk about Nebuchadnezzar. One can talk about the time, forgotten his name, the guy in Rome.
Nero.
There are so many that one can enumerate. However, such incompetency is also part of the time, or the sign of the times. What is happening now is that we have a preponderance of such incompetent leaders. It is even wrong to say they are leaders. More of these people, they are sort of personality who overestimate their abilities. And because of that overestimation, you find that they see what happens, and in their own consideration, they think they know how to handle the challenges. When they are not in government, similar to those who are spectators in a football game, who consider themselves to be the best footballers because they are not in the game, they are outside. In their thoughts, they know how to pass the balls and score the goal, not understanding the challenges which now accost the personality who now bear responsibilities and accountability for the rest of the citizenry. That is always the challenge. For one who needs to take such responsibility, there is always the need for preparation to understand, to some extent, the challenges, to understand how to pick other personalities who can help in the accomplishment of tasks which might arise from a particular challenge, be it when it refers to the health sector or the so-called economy, or mentioned all sorts of areas. Which areas these citizens look up to the personality they have elected. Like has been stressed, one cannot give out that which one has not got. If one is not skillful, you would not be skilled in dealing with challenges. If one is not humble, one would not know what humility is when challenges abound. Blustering and high talk does not count in this case. For if one looks at the case of the hospital, where real skill is necessary, when you have a challenge coming from a patient and you don't have the skills for operation, then you cannot do it. So it takes a lot for one to call himself or herself a leader. By their activities, they reveal what they have and what they lack.
Thank you again, Gregory, for that answer. Again, you know, in a way, every situation you can see it for what it really is. Just you need to be alert to, you know, to examine it and you know, like you said, by their deeds you shall know them. Jesus pointed it out to us. So it's not so difficult when somebody's not competent or they are competent. You can see it, and so you just can't be blinded by people's big talk or flash words just because they're making such promises and then they can't deliver. So thank you for that. Gregory, I've got couple of other questions which are like specific stories of which somebody's passed to me, so I'm just going to read this out. It says, a dad who smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day harmed his 2-year-old daughter, who constantly breathed the toxic air at home, and she died later of lung cancer. Was he responsible for her death? And it says in this, I don't know if this is a news story or somebody knows personally. And then he says he believes that she had weak lungs. So let me just repeat that. So a dad who smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day harmed his 2-year-old daughter, who constantly breathed in this toxic air at home, and she died later of lung cancer. Was he responsible for her death, or as he says, he believes she had weak lungs?
It is assumed when that law was given, honor father and mother, which law is applied basically, first and foremost, to parenthood. It is the duty and task of parents to ensure they provide an environment through which the younger ones, whom they have been instrumental in coming to earth, to provide that environment that will enable them to grow healthily. If, however, you now have the scenario where a parent, any of the parents or those living in the neighborhood, violate that by providing an environment which is not conducive to the young ones whom they have vowed through their activities. They have vowed by their activities, they had initially made a vow to bring up these children, but had now reneged on that and fouled that environment. What then happens is the great responsibilities which they now have to bear and will now have to account for what they themselves have precipitated. For if they had not provided such an environment, would the child not have been healthy and lived longer? This is a matter of accountability. Would they have been happy if someone came not from his environment, came from somewhere and kept smoking every day, and the child passed on? Because of that, would they accept that, oh, my child has weak lungs, that's why she died, and the person who was the chain smoker to be let free? These are the questions parents must ask themselves.
Thank you again for that answer, Gregory. It really, it seems so obvious what was the situation here, but you've made it sort of given the consequences of, what are the, well, not even consequences. You've highlighted their duties, and the responsibility is coming from those duties. So, and when you don't know what are your responsibilities, then you will talk some rubbish things, and in a way it's quite clear what are the responsibilities. So so thank you for bringing that out. I've got another question or story to talk about. Before I go there, dear listeners, I want to remind you, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdushin. And if you're interested in getting a copy of the Grail message or want some more information on the Grail message, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. And the topic we're discussing tonight is taking responsibility. Taking responsibility. You're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us on our UK number, it is 079 39 641 958. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 39 641 958. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. So, Gregory, this is another sort of story and a question that have been passed. And it says, a lady dumped her baby in a rubbish heap and ran away. Both mother and child were found by Good Samaritans after weeks of looking around for the supposed mother of the child. The lady recounted she had been gang raped by hoodlums and fell pregnant. She contracted syphilis and wanted nothing to do with the baby. Is she responsible before the Creator for abandoning the baby? Yeah, I'm not. Yes, go ahead.
The question of accountability is paramount. All the while, if you follow the beginning, the genesis of it, there is that this lady, in quotes, was raped. And it took 9 months. She bore the developing body of this child. She is fully aware that the child is developing within her. And finally, she now has a child. The possibility is there to consider very carefully whether she wants to keep the child or not. And if she does not want to keep the child, the possibility is there is to take that child to some other personalities or group or social services. That she did not do. It is assumed that a person with good volition should have at least discussed such things with others before now abandoning a soul, a young soul who, in quotes, is helpless. So one cannot say that such a mother has no responsibility. She has a responsibility of asking for help. For it is said, when the need is greatest, the power of the Almighty is nearest to you. Or that rain is followed by sunshine. There are all sorts of words or sort of phrases which should come to mind. But for that which you have borne within yourself for 9 months, you cannot just dispose of it as if it is nothing. For if your parents had disposed of you in such a careless and callous manner, you yourself would have faced challenges which would have made it impossible for you to continue to experience on earth.
Thank you for that, Gregory. A listener was listening to us about the two stories that we've just discussed, and they've given some their own sort of question, comment, I will say. So the first story, Gregory, if you remember, was about the dad who was serial smoker, and his daughter died from lung cancer. So the person who's listening has made a comment that's sad about the child who died from lung cancer, and I would say the parent was selfish to smoke at home. That's my feeling. Anyway, that's the comment of the listener. And then the second story, which we just talked about, where the woman who gave birth and who was raped, and she gave birth to the child and then abandoned the child. It's the listener is saying that it's not the baby's fault that she was. Oh, I don't know if that's correct words. Actually, it says it was not the baby's fault that she was gang raped. So I don't think we can ever blame the baby in that situation. I think it's the mother we are talking about. But yes, I guess, yes, of course, I would say, yes, it can't be the baby's fault for when she was gang raped. So, but obviously the responsibility is still with the mother to look after her child. So, as you've clearly said, Gregory. So, yeah, thank you for the comments, listener. Right. Another thing, Gregory, that's we hear all the time in the news. It's got sort of really, let's say, again, with the COVID situation, there are lots of, in quotes, conspiracy theories out there, which are being spread out, and they get a lot of following with the social media in the world that we live today. And it appears, some of them are very outlandish. It's quite sort of obvious that they can't be true. I'll give maybe one example of this. Some connection people have made. Oh, there's COVID-19 and there's 5G, sort of more mobiles that are coming out, and somehow there's some agenda to control people, or there's a harmful thing from this radiation of 5G or something. So I'm not picking anything specific here, I must admit, but let's call them not just conspiracy stories, but really some obviously false premises and statements being put out. And again, Gregory, in this world of today with technology, people can say things and there's no law, or there doesn't seem to be a system to hold them to account. And then those stories reach out to hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people, and they start believing them or taking action. And in fact, let me pick one example where, let's say with the COVID, some people are arguing the measures that have been put in place, they are taking away our freedoms. Let's say with lockdown, you're not allowed to go out, or you're not allowed to do something which you could do before that COVID was there. And it's like people are using that, that's a conspiracy to control us, take away our freedom and rights, and maybe there's something behind that, let's say, like an evil agenda behind it. So my question, Gregory, is when, let's say, some of these, let's say, are totally false, and yet it's being spread out and put out on these, in a platform which is reaching out to many millions of people. So how does the responsibility that hit those perpetrators who are giving out these false messages? It seems that the law can't do anything about them. And they just get away with it. At the same time, there's a damage being done to the people who are being misled.
Actually, here on Earth, there are always challenges. It evolves on the individual, on every individual to be vigilant, to be on the alert, to examine whatever has been passed on to it whether it has merit or it has no merit. But because there are in the majority, many are so indolent and do not bother to examine whatever has been passed on to them, whatever then comes to them, they take it wholly. And what then happens? They are therefore easily misled. Whereas if they had been a little bit more vigilant and be on the alert, then the possibility is there that through their vigorous examination, many things are then dismissed as non-existent. Therefore, they are victims to their spiritual indolence. Those who initiated such must, before too long, have to reap that which they themselves have initiated within the fabric of creation. For even if they had taken such stories without personal examination and put them out, they still bear the responsibilities. So maybe here on earth, there is nothing to hold them on, but on a spiritual basis, they have initiated some activity which has caused confusions all over the place. So they bear the spiritual responsibilities, which they will have to redeem here or hereafter. So there is no going scot-free. But those who allowed themselves, who made themselves so gullible, they will have themselves to blame. For a little examination here and another one there, and striving, being on the alert to understand processes, above all, spiritual processes, because they have so for constant examinations, when these challenges come, which challenges may be referred to as so-called fake news, they are able to assail it because in accordance with the laws of creation, they are able to have taken that information, analyzed it with the speed of light, analyzed it with their intuitive perception, and toss away many of the things which have been presented to them. But here on earth today, many times, many are very happy to be misled because they are not vigilant. They are not alive in their environment. They easily want to be convinced, right? They dwell on gossips. Because they dwell on gossip, that which is real, which is beneficial, are rejected. And they are not strong enough for that which is beautiful and that which should help in the separation from that which is truth and that which is false.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I think that's a very important point you've made. Because yes, people can be naive, but you're still responsible for what you listen, or what you hear, and assess and analyze. You can't just say, "Oh, this is supposed to be," in the news, and it's sort of something you just take it as if it's just take it on face value and not assess it, and then obviously you fall for it when you don't look at it deeply. So, Yeah, so that's really important, what you pointed out there. Um, the other thing, Gregory, this question also been said. It says Jesus described taking responsibility as a joy in his parables, but most dislike responsibility. Why? So just repeat that. Jesus described taking responsibility as a joy in his parables, but most dislike responsibility. Why?
Again, most of this is due to personal indolence. An example one would like to give, instead of using the word responsibility, use the word challenges. And again, one may use the football scenario. Would you wish to have a team where there is no keeper, where there are no challenges to make you skillful, such that there is no goalkeeper, you'll be shooting the ball into the goal and praise yourself? If there are no challenges, how can you become skillful? How can you become strong? It is the challenges that sort of elevates the person to ensure he or she becomes strong through challenges. And therefore, one should be glad that these challenges come. For knowing that these challenges will come, you prepare for these challenges. In that preparedness, you build up the skill on how you wish to deal with challenges. Then it becomes beneficial. That is alertness. For that person who is alert is able is able to pick up the vibrations, that which is useful from that which is useless, makes a decision. Without that instinct that enables you to act and act vigorously, then you will find that the human spirit goes to sleep. One cannot say the states in which one is asleep is progress for the human spirit. But a human spirit who is not spiritually asleep must also ensure he or she is very active in as many fields as possible, such that they are able to be awake in such a way that they can build up structures. That personality who is asleep cannot build up any structure. But that person who is awake is able to build up structure, to move from one place to the other. So one should be grateful that that possibility is granted, and creation, the laws of nature, grants such possibilities.
Thank you so much for that, Gregory. Again, just what I will say is, when you look at anything, you just have to reflect a little deeper, and you will see, oh, what's actually happening here. And because we sort of always know when something doesn't work out, oh, why it didn't work out. But maybe we, as you say, we become indolent and not really checking, not putting the effort in, and then and guess what? You don't get the reward for that. So it's really quite straightforward, when you look at these things. I want to take the opportunity now, listeners, to read a section from the Grail message in the Light of Truth, Bruce Sheen, which is very related to the topic for tonight, which is taking responsibility. And this is a lecture in the Grail message called Responsibility. And it's on the first page of the lecture. So I'm going to read that out now. Responsibility. This question is always one of the first, because the vast majority of people would be only too glad to throw off all responsibility and cast it on anything rather than themselves. That this is in fact self-humiliation causes them no concern here. In this respect, they are really remarkably humble and modest. But only so they can go on living all the more merrily and unscrupulously. It would indeed be so wonderful to be permitted to gratify all one's wishes, and calmly to let all one's desires right, even at other people's expense, without having to atone for it. If necessary, the earthly laws can be evaded and conflicts avoided. Under their cover, the more adept can even rake in quite a successful haul and do many a thing that would not stand up to any moral examination. In addition, they often even enjoy the reputation of being especially capable people. Thus, with a little shrewdness, one could really live very comfortably according to one's own ideas. If there were not something somewhere that awakened an uneasy feeling, if from time to time there did not appear a rising disquiet, that after all many a thing might be somewhat different from how one's own wishes shape it. And indeed it is so. The reality is serious and inexorable. The wishes of men can bring about no deviation whatsoever in this respect. Adamantine stands the law. What a man sows, he will reap many times over. These few words hold and convey much more than many a person thinks. They correspond minutely and exactly to the actual process of the reciprocal action resting in creation. No more appropriate expression could be found for it. Just as the harvest yields a multiple of the seed, so man always receives back greatly multiplied what in his own intuitive perceptions he awakens and sends out according to the nature of his volition. Thus, man bears spiritually the responsibility for everything he does. This responsibility begins already with the making of the resolution, not just with the accomplished deed, which is simply a consequence of the resolution. And the resolution is the awakening of an earnest volition. There is no division between this world and the so-called beyond, but all is only one single immense existence. The whole mighty creation, visible and invisible to man, gears together like an amazingly ingenious, never-failing mechanism. It does not function separately. Uniform laws support the whole, penetrating everything like nerve strands, holding it together and affecting each other in constant action and reaction. I'm going to stop there, dear listeners. I hope you found that reading very enlightening and helpful in sort of explaining, in the discussion that we've had today on our topic of taking responsibility. I think it really, builds up a clear picture of how the world actually works and, explains it. So I do encourage you to pick up the Grail message and just remind you again, if you are interested in getting more information or want to get a copy for yourself of the Grail message in the Light of Truth by Abdushin, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, which is GRAIL, message, MESSAGE.com. Thank you, listeners, for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. Gregory, anything you'd like to say to the listeners to say goodbye?
I wish them a beautiful week.
Great. That's really good. So, dear listeners, as I said, thank you for joining us tonight. Hope you did enjoy our show and you found it informative and, uplifting. And of course, we'll be back next Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. With another new topic. And I wish you all a great week. God bless. Take care, everybody. All the best to you. Take care.